Piers Morgan and Tucker Carlson go at it over 9/11 truth. And Tucker debuts a 9/11 special he's going to be doing to tell us what really happened. Let's talk about it, y'all. Middle America.
And you ain't black.
I don't know what I said.
The first time ever any...
What are you people?
We're Americans.
I was on mute. The incompetence. This is Middle America with Vin and Soy, where we are not left wing, we're not right wing, we are just right. We are going to be discussing a Tucker Carlson video in which he just did, I think it just dropped, he just did an interview with the big homie Piers Morgan. So we're going to be watching that together and looking at the analysis. Tucker's he's been going on the warpath. He's been saying some really, really crazy stuff, saying some stuff that you're not supposed to say in the media. And you know, it is what it is. We're just going to get right into it. One thing about Tucker Carlson, though, whether or not people understand this, Tucker Carlson is inculcated, associated with, wrapped up with the CIA, right? So his parents were in it. He's got all this shadowy stuff going on. So I understand the whole Piers Morgan's a truth teller. He's telling the truth about Israel, etc., etc. But at the same time, everything has got to be done with a grain of salt, because I don't know what the hell is going on in our world right now. So I don't know what's going on. I don't know if this is a long con. I don't know if this is a giant op. I have no idea what's going on. Having said that, here we go. Without further ado, Piers Morgan and Tucker Carlson discussing 9/11 truth. Let's do it.
The official story on 9/11 is a complete lie.
The point was to leverage the pain and outrage of that day and use it to convince Americans that we ought to invade Iraq. I'm not alleging that they committed 9/11, but I am stating, because it's a fact, that they were aware the hijackers were in the U.S. Even right now, as we speak, the CIA is effectively refusing to release information that they have from 24 years ago. They should be forced at gunpoint to divulge this. I'm not an anti-Semite, obviously. I'm not even anti-Israel. And you're calling me names is not going to stop me, because I don't have to take orders from you about what I'm allowed to know or not know, because it's my country. So don't tell me that the greatest threat we face is Iran. That's a lie. It's not an endorsement of Iran, okay? Doesn't make me a simp for the Shiites.
President Trump told reporters at the time that you had called him.
I mean, okay, so we're getting the summary of what he's saying. As I said, he's saying a lot of things that are truth-telling, dangerous, controversial. I agree 100%, but he is all up in the State Department. So, like, I'm sorry, but you got to take it with a grain of salt with anybody that's part of the intelligence apparatus. I think everybody would probably agree with that.
And apologized. Is that true? The biggest dividing line in politics is arguably no longer right or left. Instead, it's a lot to do with trust. There are those who broadly trust our institutions and our experts, and who generally believe in the stories and the mythologies about our history and the events which define it. On the other side of the people who increasingly don't trust any of these things. They see a deep state, a swamp, and a cabal of vested interests who are anything but America first. That dividing line explains a lot about MAGA's division on everything from the Epstein files to US support for Israel's war and the decision to bomb Iran. This week marks 24 years.
Yeah, I mean, you know, when people talked about the Trump cult, I'd always used to say, you can't say that the Trump thing is a cult, because when he came out with the vaccine, all of them got together and said, no, Trump, this is not the way to go. And so I gave them credit for it. The problem is this Epstein thing. What the Epstein thing has shown is that both sides were right. The people that said the Trump cult was a cult were right, and I was also right. What do I mean by that? Well, the fact that there's such a fracture in MAGA relative to Epstein indicates that. Because anybody who is still supporting Mr. Trump after the Epstein situation and is still repeating the party lines about how they trust Trump and the government relative to the Epstein situation, if you say that, you are 100% in a cult. Because it's impossible to see it otherwise. We continue.
Since 9/11, the deadliest terrorist attack in American history, for most of those 24 years, there's been no real dividing line over how most Americans interpret the horrific events of the day itself. But Tucker Carlson's about to release a documentary series with the tantalizing tagline, "It's time Americans learned what actually happened." And Tucker Carlson, founder of the Tucker Carlson Network, joins me now. Tucker, welcome back to Uncensored.
Thank you, Piers. Thanks for having me.
You're looking very sprightly, if I may say so.
Thank you.
There must be a delay.
I think your intro is, you make a smart point that it is about trust. It's not a classic partisan division. And I'm really struck, we spent the last 4 months looking into 9/11, reassessing the explanations we were given by the government for 9/11. And one of the things that really struck me was the viciousness with which anyone who questioned it, certainly in the first several years, was treated with. You know, they were dismissed as crazy. By the way, I participated in that.
Yeah.
I attacked people who questioned 9/11, so I'm very culpable there. But there's a very simple way to...
Yeah, see, this is the thing about Tucker. Like, I'm just never gonna trust any agency person, and whether or not he directly worked for the agency, it's almost immaterial to me. He's a State Department person. Let's say it that way. But I love the way that he takes accountability for his mistakes. Him and Anna are the only ones that do it. I have no idea. What's up, Ben, the editor? Good to see you, baby. I have no idea why it's so difficult for these people to say, I made a mistake. All it means is that you're God and that you're not omniscient. Yeah, I was completely and totally subsumed by 9/11 and the government narrative about 9/11, and anybody that resisted war or violence or the party line or the government line, I said was crazy and unpatriotic, and I was saying they were lying because they were afraid and they didn't want to fight and blah 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 blah. So I went right along with it too. We continue.
Dispel conspiracy theories to make people with dumb ideas look foolish, and that's by disclosing what actually happened. It's by telling the truth. It's through transparency that you gain trust. It's not, I mean, if you ask your children, where were you last night? I'm not going to tell you. Does that engender trust? Of course not. It destroys it. And so there's also a sense in which it's outrageous that the U.S. government could presume to hide from the people who own the country, the citizens, the truth about an event that changed the nation more than any other in our lifetimes, any since the Civil War. It's a completely different country since 9/11. Millions.
Yeah, I was telling my kids that. It's just fascinating, like looking at my kids and being like, all they know is the post 9/11 world. All my kids were born in war. Every single one of them were born in a war, some sort of in the GWAT. Yeah, it's all we know, and it's a little bit sad to me actually that my kids did not understand the pre 9/11 America, because it was a very different America, very different. We could think.
2 people died in the aftermath of 9/11, and so what exactly is the justification for not telling us what happened that day? And they haven't. Period.
Well, let me play a trailer from the series. Let's take a look at this.
The official story on 9/11 is a complete lie. The 9/11 report is a joke.
You have the CIA following 2 men all over the planet, and then eventually even to America, right? And you don't tell the FBI. 9/11 Commission to cover.
So what did happen? What did the government know? What did foreign governments know? There was a cover-up. Why? It's been nearly 25 years. It is time Americans learned what actually happened.
It's a great trailer. What to you, though, Tucker, are the biggest lies perpetrated
We're going to be covering this as he covers it. We continue.
on the American people from 9/11?
Well, the core lie is the 9/11 Commission itself, which was an instrument, a political instrument of the Bush administration run by a guy called Philip Zelikow. And from beginning to end, he stage managed the explanation for 9/11 in a way that benefited the neoconservative factions within the Bush administration. The point was to leverage the pain and outrage of that.
The neoconservatives, for the uninitiated, were folks that had the philosophy that America was so powerful that it was our birthright to basically dominate the world, that we could reorient maps, hence the Arab Spring, etc., etc. It was this whole, okay, we have American exceptionalism. We believe in American exceptionalism. We should take our rightful place in the world, expand the American empire, and do what we do because we're the only. That was neoconservatives. Google or GPT, Project for a New American Century, and you can pretty much see what we're talking about. We continue.
Day and use it to convince Americans that we ought to invade Iraq, which of course had nothing whatsoever to do with 9/11. And he wrote the commission report with that in mind. And by the way, he wrote it before the investigation took place. He literally sketched it out before they knew what the facts were. And then during the course of the investigation, he systematically, I'm not guessing, by the way, this is not a conspiracy theory. This is the testimony of people who are directly involved in the commission. Chairman Tom Kean, the former governor of New Jersey, Republican governor, he stage managed the entire thing and prevented investigators from looking into like core questions. For example, the CIA was fully aware that many of the hijackers who committed 9/11 were in the United States. They had followed them, as the trailer suggests, around the world.
Yeah, there are numerous intelligence apparati that we're looking at, bros. But oddly enough, the exact same thing is true. Netanyahu and the rest of them boys were told way before about this plan. Their celebrated intelligence apparatus had clear knowledge of this, interceptions, etc., etc. The day it was happening, while Hamas was staging, because you got to stage before you go in, Israeli soldiers were reporting to their base saying, hey, these guys are staging. It looks like they're about to do an attack. Nothing was done for those. As a matter of fact, half those people that reported that were female, were kidnapped and killed. So you have these major events, and same thing with Pearl Harbor, right? Like there's the whole, we knew that the Japanese were, et cetera, but we had factions, we had isolationists that were saying we need to stay out of World War II. You had other people saying we had to go into it because we would emerge as, and they were right, obviously, and so we needed a little shove, and then turn the other way, and boom, there's Pearl Harbor, there's 9/11, now we've got a new America, there's Pearl Harbor, now we're in World War II, there's October 7th, and now the Israelis are about to build beachfront property in Gaza. This is a standard tactic that is used by governments to encourage democracies to go in a certain direction. When you're in a democracy, you can't just say, hey, we're going to go to war, blah, 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 blah. You've got to get people to believe that they want to do what the government wants to do. And situations like that give people the strange motivation all of a sudden. Now they want to go to war. Imagine that. We continue.
11 out of the 19 hijackers had visas for travel to the United States issued in Jeddah, Saudi Arabia, at exactly the moment that John Brennan was the station chief for the CIA in Saudi Arabia. They knew that they were here. They didn't hide the fact that they were here. I mean, Khalid al-Mihdhar, who was a 26-year-old Saudi, the plane that hit the Pentagon, was in the San Diego phone book, and he was being followed by the CIA. I mean, this is all documented. And not just by the CIA, by foreign intel services, probably the British, possibly the French, definitely the Israelis. They knew. Now, I'm not alleging that they committed 9/11, but I am stating, because it's a fact, that They were aware the hijackers were in the U.S. and were planning a terror attack against the United States.
What's the material difference between being the person that commits and constructs the conspiracy and execution of a terrorist attack, or knowing that it's being constructed and executed step by step and doing absolutely nothing about it? I don't see the material difference between the two. But Tucker has to operate in these sort of delineations because they're going to red herring the hell out of him, even if he's right. So these are the games that you have to play. This is how you know when you're talking to dishonest people, when you got to be really picky about your language. We continue.
And they never passed that information to the FBI, to local police, much less to the American public, and 3,000 people died as a result. So what is that? Huge parts of the 9/11 story were left out of the commission report. For example, what happened to Building 7, which was not only not next to the Twin Towers, which were hit by airplanes, but had a building in between itself and those buildings, collapsed that afternoon.
9/11 Building 7, did they really pull it? And a bunch of other cover-ups. We continue.
For reasons that no one has been able to explain since. You're not a lunatic for asking. There's no plausible explanation for how that building collapsed.
Well, so let's talk
That's
about that.
not even mentioned.
Well, let's
in
talk
the
about that for a
9/11
moment.
report.
Because
Yes.
Okay, so Building 7, so you had World Trade, so the first World Trade Center was Tower 1. The second World Trade Center that you saw was actually Tower 5, okay? And then down Canal Street, right around the corner from there, there was another complex of buildings, and then you had Building 7. Building 7 also imploded, collapsed, but it wasn't hit by a plane. There's no plane that took down Building 7. It just collapsed, okay? So it's what's going on? How did that happen? That's always been this giant random question mark. Like, what the hell? There's no plane that hit it. Why did it just randomly drop? That makes no sense. We continue.
it's one of the many things that have raged since. If you look into the investigation into Tower 7, the findings of the investigation into it were that the North Tower, when it came down, had set off a load of fires in Building 7. And it was a steel structure and shouldn't have gone down, but it did. That these fires burned all afternoon, and I think it was about 5 o'clock in the afternoon or something, the tower eventually gave way to the welter of fires raging inside it. And it was the only time that had happened to a structure that was built in that way. However, there has been another tower very similar to that in structure, which has since gone down in Tehran. So it's no longer the only one. In other words, there is another example of a tower like that collapsing. So when it comes to the specific theory about that, what is the alternative explanation? I mean, if you're examining another theory other than the one that the investigation concluded was simply...
We've got one random building in Iran in situations we don't know about. So two things that have never happened in the history of Western ingenuity and construction happened 25 years apart. So there we go. Now we have the answer. That's why Tucker was smiling at it. We continue.
The North Tower came down, fires were set off in Tower 7, and then it eventually collapsed. What is the other theory which we should give more credence to?
I don't know. I don't know that the onus is on me or anyone who seeks the truth about what happened to come up with an alternative theory. The onus is on federal authorities to explain why, for example, they never investigated it. Why, for example, the rubble and the steel from that building was carted off within hours and sent out of the country to Asia. Why, for example, an analysis done not by kooks, but by chemists found traces of explosive material in the dust from that day. Why structural engineers who have kind of no skin in this game came to the conclusion that that just couldn't happen based on all available evidence. And that none of that is addressed at all or even mentioned in the 9/11 report. So, and they're all kind of...
You know what I wish? I wish this during COVID. And I don't know, I think Joe Rogan would be the perfect one to do this, but the government, I don't know, they may not have a choice. But I wish that you could take credible scholars, like, so let's say this virology issue, right? Or epidemiology, that stuff during COVID. Why couldn't we have a 5-day, 3-hour a day, this is the debate, this is what should happen, this is what I think should happen, blah, 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 blah. And then by the end of the week, the American people have heard from both sides, and then we start, issuing legislation or whatever, based on the outcome of that. Having all these people come on social media, Piers Morgan, all the rest of it, these people are not experts. We're just talking heads. But if we could get actual experts on this topic to have a actual debate, that would be great. Because what happens is these people make their declarations from on high. They've got the bully pulpit because they've got the media and all the rest of it. And then you have other experts, I'm talking about COVID, for example, where people were saying, well, actually, I don't look at it that way, but because they didn't have the backing of the government and big media, they were marginalized as crazy and yada, yada, yada. And the government actors felt like they didn't need to talk to those, kook doctors or whatever, take the vaccine. So, yeah, unbelievable. We continue.
Of anomalies, as I know that you're fully aware, and there are possible explanations to explain all of them. For example, the BBC report on air saying the building had fallen when it hadn't fallen yet. There are all sorts of reasons to wonder, like, what the hell is this? But it's not incumbent on us to provide explanation. It's incumbent on the people running the government and running the supposed investigation into this to tell us, like, what was that? And
I have a very open mind. The reason I'm interested to watch your documentary series, I have a genuinely open mind, and actually, I would say it's been more opened generally about this kind of thing since the COVID pandemic. That I was too, I think, credulous about what the authorities were saying through the pandemic to my detriment. You and I have had.
This is mind-boggling to me, bro. This is absolutely mind-boggling, the time that we're in, where the government and the things that you can tell that there are certain situations where these guys went overboard and they pushed it too far, and now the genuine populace, the commoners are saying, I don't know about all this stuff right here. They got me once, and now I'm questioning everything. And now people are retroactively questioning everything, and now you've got this other faction, and they're like, this is revisionist history. It's like, well, yes, it is revisionist history, because if the initial history you were giving was a revision, then you need a revision of the revision to get to the truth, right? So it's revisionist history, I guess, but it is very fascinating to watch what's happening psychologically to people as the government stacks lie after lie after lie after lie on top of every one of these major events. And because of the nature of social media, and because of the fact that now everybody has a DSLR camera where you can see all this stuff happening in 4K, sometimes 8K, it's very, very difficult for the government to control information in such a way as to just get everybody to just believe what you have to say. They lied to us about COVID. They marginalized people that were saying the most rational, logical things, and a lot of us went along with it because we're trusting the science, blah, 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 blah. Massive, 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 massive situation. So this is just fascinating for somebody like Piers Morgan to say, I am now willing to look at a lot of these entrenched narratives that have gotten us to where we are right now in 2025. I'm willing to question. I'm willing to look at that and question it. That's incredible. Incredible.
This conversation. So I'm actually have a very open mind about this. I mean, on the specifics, for example, the BBC report you mentioned was based on a false Reuters report that they retracted soon afterwards and said it shouldn't have gone out. And the building, you can see the building behind.
So what they're talking about is the BBC and a couple other outlets during 9/11 reported the collapse of certain buildings significantly before they actually collapsed. And so the 9/11 conspiracy theorists were like, how does that work? How did you know that was going to happen? It looks like you're reading from a script, etc., etc. We continue.
The BBC journal. So it was obviously ludicrous. CNN did the same thing. But having been in the news game as you have, on big breaking news stories, fog of war stuff happens. And if it was a genuine error by Reuters, okay. I remember, for example, just as a comparison, I remember being on air at CNN when the hurricane came through, Hurricane Sandy, burst through Manhattan. I don't know if you were probably at Fox then, I think. But if you remember, half the lights went out in Lower Manhattan. And I remember a report coming from CNN that the stock exchange was underwater, and that had an immediate impact on global markets. And it turned out that was a false report. So these things can happen. US national debt is more than 30 years at one go at the World Trade Center. That there was just not a collective effort by the CIA, by FBI, by other intelligence agencies around the world to stop him succeeding with a second attempt. So is it cock up, or do you think there is merit to suggestion that some people somewhere must have known more than we've been told?
Well, we know that people did know more than we've been told. I mean, somebody shorted the airlines and a bunch of the banks that were affected. Now, this is not a conspiracy theory. It's not a guess. This is publicly available information. Now, the FBI found out the identity of the person or institution that shorted these events on 9/11 and made a huge amount of money by doing that, but never released that information. So why can't we know?
In other words, he's saying that there were people that made decisions relative to the stock market, selling off certain things or shorting certain things, especially with the airline industry, pretty approximate to 9/11, which means obviously that they knew, or it implies that they knew. I am very interested to see if Tucker's going to talk about the dancing Israelis, because that is something interesting. And if he doesn't, I might do a little thing on the dancing Israelis, because, I mean, it's just interesting. We continue.
Who clearly had foreknowledge. I mean, if you're shorting American Airlines a week before 9/11, when no one knows it's coming, I think you should have to explain why you did that. And if you're shorting Barclays and banks that were affected by 9/11, why can't we know who you are? These are public markets, by the way. This is not private equity. This is publicly traded equities. So
By the way, like, if these were like Saudis, you think if it was a cabal of Saudis, you know, rich Saudis who started pulling out of Boeing and shorting all of these 9/11 affected stocks, that we wouldn't have known about it? Interesting.
I wonder about that. So clearly, yes, there was foreknowledge. By the way, there was a team, this is according to the FBI, by the way, this is the FBI saying, there was a team of clearly intel-connected foreigners who were arrested after 9/11, as you well know, videotaping the terror attacks. This is, I'm almost verbatim quoting from the FBI assessment of this. And the FBI determined that they apparently had foreknowledge of the attacks. So
he's talking about the dancing Israelis. That, what he just described, was the dancing Israelis. They were videotaping it, high-fiving each other, celebrating it. They looked Middle Eastern. White lady from Brooklyn saw them across the bridge celebrating in New Jersey, whatever, called up the FBI. And even, I think it was Chuck Schumer, somebody went on TV and was talking about, like, how there were Saudis that were dancing during 9/11. Unfortunately, it wasn't Saudis. They were Israeli. Do what you will with that, dear listener. I mean, it looks like he's going to cover it, so we're going to cover it too. But holy moly.
Why can't we know more about that? Exactly. Shut up. That's bigoted. No, this is my country, actually. I know people who died on 9/11. Everything was changed because of it. I promptly went off to the Middle East, just like everyone else in our business. I'm sure you did as well. And then we lost our civil liberties at home. We immediately started torturing people and locking up people for years. They are still locked up in Guantanamo Bay with no charges at all. And the rest of us, very much me included, nodded our heads and were like, yeah, they're bad. They're Muslim terrorists. Now, I think a lot of them were bad, and they were Muslim terrorists. On the other hand, if your government is allowed to torture people and lock them up indefinitely without charging them, how long before they do that to you? We don't do that here. And I know it's very common in the UK now, which is an authoritarian country. We don't want that here. And 9/11
What do you mean? We don't want that. It's been here, boy. Government can fly in and jam you up in that rendition. Google rendition program, bro. My brother in Christ, you could wake up in a black site in Yemen, have no idea what the hell is going on. Nobody ever see and hear from you again. Then the government be like, damn, that wasn't the guy. We made a mistake. Well, I mean, what are we going to do? Cut him loose and send him back home so we can go on Piers Morgan and talk about how we jammed him up and sent him to a black site? How do you think that went? We continue.
Dramatically changed our assumptions about what the government is allowed to do. So, and by the way, I should say, the main beneficiary in the United States of those attacks was the CIA, which allowed them to happen. So the CIA budget became, more than doubled. Of course, we're not allowed to know what the CIA budget is, even in government. This is a fact, by the way. If you ask a high-level official at the White House currently, what's the CIA's full budget? They can't tell you. It is a secret that is so closely guarded that even people in charge of administering the government don't know what their budget is. But from what we can tell, it's more than twice what it was before 9/11.
Okay, but what you're suggesting with your phraseology about that is that the CIA were part of a kind of inside track knowledge about what may happen, which is obviously an incredibly serious
No, I'm not
charge.
suggesting that. I'm not suggesting that. I'm stating the facts, which are that the CIA was fully aware that many of these hijackers were here, that those visas were issued in a country with which we have very close security service cooperation at a time when John Brennan was running the station there.
But that's different to saying that they knew what was going to happen.
Well, they actually did know that these people were planning.
I mean, that when you say knew what was going to happen, there are ways that I could say no and still pass a polygraph. In other words, I mean, like 400 people jumped from the building. Somebody says, did you know what was going to happen? And I knew that people were planning on attacking the World Trade Center. But they asked me that question during the polygraph, and I focus on, did I know that 400 people were going to jump out of buildings? No, I did not know what was going to happen. So what do you mean, did they know what was going to happen? Do you mean, because nobody in an intelligence organization traffics in knowledge, right? Did they have sufficient intelligence that would lead a reasonable person to believe that these people were going to seriously consider executing attack against the United States of America? And is there enough reasonable evidence for a reasonable person to believe that they would be marginally successful in said attack? That is the question. And there is nobody in that organization at that period of time, I know for a fact, that could answer that question honestly. In the negative, we continue.
A terror attack because they surveilled a meeting planning it in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia a year before, and then followed the guy as he came to the United States and arrived in San Diego for flight training. So again, I'm not guessing about any of this. These are established facts. There's no person, including then CIA Director George Tenet, who would deny this. They'll say, oh, you're a conspiracy theorist. Okay, fine, whatever, attack my character as you will, but tell me how I'm wrong, and of course I'm not wrong. So
well,
I'm not
all I would
alleging or
say,
suggesting anything.
I'm not saying you're right
or
or wrong or anything. All I'm saying is that from everything you're saying, it is a leap. It is a leap. There is a demonstrable difference, I would argue, and by all means push back on this, but I would argue that there's a demonstrable leap between knowledge of bad people moving around and maybe monitoring them and aware they may be up to bad things, but actually having coherent, clear knowledge in advance that they were planning the attack using planes on the World Trade Center.
I understand.
Again, knowledge, as in like knowledge. No. But no intelligence apparatus has nobody's gonna say, we know. Okay, it is, do you have sufficient evidence for a reasonable person to believe X, Y, Z? That is how intelligence works. It does not traffic in knowledge, Piers.
You're saying that intent matters, and I would not, of course I would not dispute that. Intent does matter, it matters under the law, and it matters morally. Did you mean to do it? Yes, that matters. However, it doesn't matter as much as we pretend that it does. If I pull up to a casino and leave my toddler in the back of the car with the windows up and just kind of forget, and the kid dies, do you say, oh, you didn't mean to kill your own child? No, you'd say through your negligence, your child died.
Yes.
It's murder. Now, it's not a first-degree murder, but it's certainly at least a manslaughter.
It's certainly
And
severe
so
negligence. I agree with that.
we
and
know-
I do, and I agree with you.
That is a kind of murder.
Yeah, listen, I don't think there's any doubt that there was massive negligence.
No. If I intercept 5 people and they're saying, we're going to rob this bank at September 11th at 8:03 a.m. Eastern Time, and I hear it over and over and over again, and I'm the security guard, and I leave the door open, that is not the same thing as a mom going to gamble and forgetting that her 3-year-old's in the car and the kid dies. Okay, that's negligence. This is, I could reasonably assert that you and your buddies were about to rob my bank at 8:30 on September 11th Eastern Standard Time. And instead of alerting authorities, instead of saying, hey, we need to get somebody to check this out, I leave the door open. Oh no, I am complicit for sure.
When it came to 9/11 happening on the watch of whoever was running the US government at the time, the CIA, the FBI, all of them. No one can credibly say that what happened was not a catastrophic failure of intelligence, because I've always assumed there must be some guys at the Pentagon in a room whose only job it is to think the unthinkable. And it's not that difficult to think that one day somebody may hijack a plane and use it as a weapon, right? It's not that. Yes. When you've got fundamentalists prepared to kill themselves as they kill people, doing it using a plane did not seem to me to be that unthinkable. And yet nobody seemed to have thought that through.
Well, the U.S. government had war-gamed that. Of course. Look, I mean, that was, of course, a possibility in the minds of the people whose job it is to protect the United States from it happening. They war-gamed that. They took bin Laden very seriously. We interviewed members of the bin Laden station, CIA bin Laden station, who...
Bro, I can show you pamphlets pre-9/11 that had the trade towers in a bullseye with a plane. Like, we absolutely knew that was coming, or that there was a potential for that.
I think are patriotic, decent people who really wanted to prevent a terror attack. But there are also elements of the CIA which does not act as, a coherent body. It's a vast, sprawling organization. There's not a single person at CIA who understands everything that's happening at CIA at any given time, because it's compartmentalized. That's the...
I can always tell when a person has been entrenched in that organization and doesn't know not to let people know. People that have worked in they don't say the CIA. They say CIA. If you've worked at CIA, etc., etc. Go, you talk to any officer in that organization. That's what they say. So that's what I'm saying about Tucker. Like Tucker is not just some he's a really astute investigative journalist and he just wants to know the truth and blah 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 blah. I do think there's part of him in that, but this all could just be a very elaborate continuation of a CIA policy. Like, I have no idea. What's up, Chris? I have no idea in any way, shape, or form what is actually going on here. I'm just telling you, go listen. They don't say the CIA. They say CIA. That's what, all right. Anyway, I'm the only one that cares about that. We continue.
Nature of it. And so, but there were people at CIA, and I would say John Brennan clearly one of them, who understood that these terrorists, these hijackers, planned to commit violence against Americans in the United States, and they did nothing about it. Now, you can draw your own conclusions about that. In fact, they abetted it. They helped the hijackers get here. Fact. And so you can argue about why, but the truth is it's incumbent on them to tell us why. We had a...
Same thing Netanyahu did with Hamas. Paid Hamas millions of dollars, ignored all the warnings, blah, blah, blah. Guys, think about this. The Mossad, who brags about how they've got beepers, and they brag about how we did this extremely targeted killing of this dude in Iran. They didn't have the intel to stop the Hamas incursion? I don't know, man. They're about to take over Gaza. Isn't that interesting? We continue.
A fake investigation. George W. Bush, Dick Cheney, Condoleezza Rice, Philip Zelikow participated in hiding the truth from the public. Again, I voted for them. It's not a partisan point. That is a fact. We know it now. And why isn't there an actual 9/11 commission dedicated to finding out what happened? And the truth is, not only is there not, but even right now, as we speak, the CIA is effectively refusing to release information that they have from 24 years ago. And why? What is the answer? I don't know, but they should be forced at gunpoint to divulge this. Because
it reminds me,
it
reminds me of the JFK files, of the RFK files, of the Martin Luther King files, of the Epstein files. Time and again, we are led to believe we're all going to find out exactly what went on, and then we don't. So that there is clearly behind the.
We haven't found out definitively what's going on, but I think a lot of us know. I think a lot of us have a sneaking suspicion about 9/11, about October 7th, and about a whole bunch of other stuff now. Because now everybody's looking and saying, well, what's the results of these horrible situations? There's always people who benefit from it, right?
Scenes at high levels of the government machinery, a concerted effort, and there has been for many, many decades, to prevent the American people and the wider world, but the American people, I think, from knowing the full story about any of those things. Today's show is brought to you by Oxford Natural.
He goes, why do you think that is, Piers? That's a good question. Why do you think that is, Mr. Morgan, that seems to be the case, currently speaking? Interesting question. We continue.
Over £100.
The subject of a bunch of federal laws passed by Congress that demand disclosure. The current president, on January 23rd, issued an executive order saying release it all, and they haven't. So why is that? Is it to protect the CIA, actually? Who was the CIA director in 1963? John McCone. How many people know that? How many people care? Nobody. So is it to really protect?
How do you know that? You know a lot of people. You know a lot about the State Department, homie.
An agency, 60 odd years later? I don't think it is. Or maybe it is. I don't know. All I know, and this is a statement of fact, that they are not releasing relevant information that pertains to that event. That
I agree with you.
The murder of his sitting U.S. president.
Yeah.
And by the way, a whole lot of other things. I mean, the UAP, you could just go on forever. And the cumulative effect, it bears on what you said in your smart intro, I think, which is that at a certain point, people understand it's not a democracy, that people do not rule. They actually have no relevant input into how the government operates. It's not operating for their benefit. And they either become one of two things: cynical and resigned, non-participatory, I give up, give me some fentanyl, or they become revolutionary. And both are really bad. Both make a stable future impossible. And so
I'm not sure that revolutionaryism is bad. It's bad, obviously, for a person in Tucker's situation. And it'd probably be bad for a person in my situation. But something's got to change. I'm not sure revolutionism and fentanyl are equivalent.
remedy is disclosure. And I have to say, at this point, because they've been so resistant to it, I don't know why we have a CIA. It's the most important significant player in global affairs. It's not controlled by anybody. It's not democratically controlled. Again, we don't know the budget. And that fact alone prevents this country from being a real place. So why do we have it? We need intel gathering, of course. You need some sort of probably paramilitary force, I guess. You could have that. We have a DOD. Why is it run out of CIA? Why does that still exist? And
CIA is the paramilitary force called the Activity because when you're intelligence gathering and you want to hit somebody or assassinate somebody and things like that, relying on the juntas and all the rest of it turned out to be a really bad thing. You have to outsource things where you need specific things done. And you also didn't want to rely on the U.S. military because you need deniability. So we set up this thing called the Activity. You just Google the Activity. And so they're essentially the paramilitary arm of our intelligence apparatus. We continue. Oh, man.
No one is willing to answer that question because they're afraid. And the truth is, if the president of the United States is murdered and everyone believes that the CIA played a role in it, probably lots of players there, but CIA was clearly one of them, the Counterintel Division clearly played a role and lied about it, then every subsequent U.S. president lives with that hanging over his head.
Well, also, we've had...
Right. Right.
Guardrails, you cross over them, and you could get killed.
Right. I mean, we've had with Donald Trump, there were 2 attempts on his life in the run-up to the last election.
That's correct.
One was this young kid who appeared to have absolutely nothing on his files whatsoever. We seem to know nothing about this person. He just...
Other than he's in a BlackRock commercial. Okay.
Somehow existed in a total vacuum of any information. And the second guy, a few weeks later, was able to sit in a bush for 12 hours preparing to assassinate Donald Trump if he'd walked up about 500 yards up a golf course to where he was waiting by one of the greens. And I found that deeply unsettling, because you would have thought that Trump by then would be the most protected human being in history, having just survived an assassination attempt. Both of those cases raised all sorts of questions which we just don't know the answers to. And that's happened in the last year.
I don't know, and I'm you know, I can't say this definitively, but my strong impression is that, you know, people at the top levels of government don't know the answers, right? So
right.
that
including
that
Donald Trump,
paints a pretty. I think that's right, but you know, I don't know, but the picture that emerges is very clear, and everyone can see it, which is a government that is not controlled by the voters or even the people the voters elect to control the government. It's controlled independently by the people who staff it and other aligned interests, not all of them American. So that is not a picture of democracy or even of oligarchy. It's a picture of something much darker than that. And people who point it out are roundly attacked and criticized, and their children are attacked. I mean, you know, anyone who's done this knows the consequences of doing it, but it doesn't make it any less true, actually. You can attack me all you want, don't really...
Tucker's kid now also works in the U.S. government. Didn't people know that? Did you know that? Tucker Carlson's son is currently in working in the U.S. government. So this is a dude who's like generationally been part of the intelligence apparatus. This is their family tradition. So you just got to understand that about this dude, man. Like, people are desperate for truth, and they're desperate for truth tellers, but you got to be careful. You got to be careful, because I understand we all want the truth, and we so are desperate for somebody to speak truth to power and just say it and not be afraid. And I get it, and he might be the guy, but when you've got 3 generations of, you know, I've met a lot of dudes like, oh, I'm 4th generation Army, you know, whatever, the 3rd generation SEAL, whatever, or 2nd generation SEAL or whatever. But you also have people who are like institutions in the intelligence apparatus, and that is, if you think about this dynamic for a second, right? If you're the president, you can only do it for 8 years, right? There's a shelf life. If you're one of those people that likes the jihad tourism, you can only do the war fighting and the contracting thing there's a shelf life to that, because eventually, right, it's a young man's game. You know, you hit 40, whatever, like, that's it. You know, there's a shelf life to it. If you're in intelligence, you don't have an 8-year window, and you're not limited by physical limitations. So think about that relative to having a family tradition of being part of the intelligence apparatus. We continue.
Why don't you answer the question, how does this work? And why can't I know? And if I can't know, who has greater authority than I do as a taxpayer and a citizen? What you're really revealing is that the system itself is utterly fake. Okay, I guess everyone knows that now, but what are the consequences of knowing that? The consequences of knowing that are dire and scary. And so I think at this very late date, we should try to fix it. And the only way to fix it is by telling people the truth and reading them in, as they say in Washington. Read me in to what my government is doing with my money in my name. And if you won't do...
Read me in is an intelligence terminology that says, let this person in on the top secret information that other people aren't supposed to know.
...that, then at a certain point, like, how is it not justified to try to replace the government? Like, that actually is tyranny. What's the other definition of tyranny? I don't, so they're really playing with fire. I don't want revolution. I can't stand violence.
Yeah, see, people say, like, the things that precipitated the American Revolution would have long been violated by a mile. So this is sort of the contradiction where people like Pierce are trying to keep everybody together and keep people away from revolution for obvious reasons. But on the other hand, if you know history and you use words like tyranny, if you say that we have a tyrannical government, like you just told Pierce that the UK is a tyrannical government, then the only American response to tyranny is jihad. So this is not a good situation, guys. You've got, on CNN right now, it's on front of the CNN page, that the government of Chicago, the state of Chicago is preparing themselves for ICE raids from the federal government. It's like, what do you mean preparing yourself? So what are you saying? You're saying that if ICE comes in to raid Chicago, you guys are going to resist them? That's a civil war. Like, we're in a very bad situation right now. So, like, Tucker is trying to keep people away from revolution, but simultaneously saying that we're under tyranny and things of that nature. Like,
A civil war is the worst thing that could ever happen. I'm not calling for any of that. I'm merely saying that's going to happen at some point if they don't make good on the core promise, which is it's your country, it exists for your benefit, you have a right to know relevant things, you can't just be dismissed with the back of the hand and called names. Keep that shit up and, it will get really ugly. That's my
I mean, Tucker could be sincere in the sense that he is seeing that there's a form of mutually assured destruction here, because if you keep trying to reorient the map and, create these terrorist attacks and initiate these false flags and things of that nature, and you start accumulating a bunch of COVID and a bunch of economic pain because of what they did during COVID and things of that nature, and people start finding out it's a lie, eventually all that shit's going to tip over because you are destroying people's lives and literally killing them.
In your series, do you dispel some of the sort of madder conspiracy theories? And I'll give an example, which you may or may not agree with me as mad, but there's been a raging conspiracy theory ignited again by what's happened in Gaza, that Israel was somehow implicated in 9.
So he's like, dispel all the crazy conspiracy theories. So Pierce doesn't know that earlier when Tucker was talking about operatives from a foreign government taking pictures and all this during 9/11, he doesn't know that those were Israelis. He doesn't understand that.
11, it was in their interests for that to happen, because then it would lead rage against all their enemies in the Middle East and so on. And yet, of course, if you look at the people who died, at least I think 110 or more people who died that day were known to be Jewish. It is
Cantor Fitzgerald. I'll never forget Cantor Fitzgerald, rest in peace. But everybody in that fucking office died on 9/11. All Jewish. Rest in peace, man.
Estimated maybe another 80 were Jewish, which meant that about 10% of all the victims that day were likely to have been Jewish, which would seem to dispel the suggestion this was some Jewish thing that they had been involved with. But do you tackle that kind of conspiracy theory in the series? In other words, as well as exploring stuff that you think needs to be highlighted and exposed and we need to know more about, do you also dispel stuff which has been allowed to rage around for nearly 25 years now and kill that off?
Well, it hasn't so much been allowed. It's actually been greatly discouraged. I don't repeat every theory about it. They're endless, and I don't really see the point in elevating things that we can't know are true. I would say the effect on me was to make me more suspicious, actually. And again, we didn't interview people who gather their information about 9/11 from the internet. We interviewed only people who are directly involved in the events and the subsequent events. So government officials. So it was almost exclusively government officials. And during the course of that experience, I became more prone to believe that this is really, really bad. This is super bad. And as to the question that you asked specifically about Israel, no, of course I didn't allege that, the Jews did it. I don't even know what that means. I think, in fact, saying things like that is a way to discredit real questions.
Right.
Like, we know, Benjamin Netanyahu on camera right after said this is a good thing because it brings the United States into a conflict that we've been involved in on an existential level for decades.
And the dancing Israeli folks, after we interrogated them in the FBI and determined that they were foreign operators, we sent them back to Israel. They ended up on Israeli media, and they asked those individuals, why were you recording it? Why were you filming it? And their response was to document the event.
He said that out loud. I'm not guessing, you can pull the tape. We know that a group of Israeli art students, who clearly were not art students, clearly some of them were aligned with Israeli intelligence, were arrested and held for quite some time in the United States before being released without charges. And we know that a group of them, again, I'm quoting an FBI document here, not the internet, filmed the attacks on 9/11, and I'm quoting, seemed to have foreknowledge of those attacks. Now, you were not allowed.
I didn't even quote that part, but that is in the report. And then they went on Israeli TV and said, what the fuck? Why were you guys doing that? And they said to film to document the event. And remember, they were filming it, high-fiving and dancing. They're literally called the Dancing Israelis. I'm sure there's going to be an episode on it. Feel how you want to feel. We have the right to know. This happened 25 years ago almost, a quarter century ago. And you're just now finding out from some kid without a college degree that there were dancing Israelis doing all this shit with the F. You're just now finding that out? I think that's a problem.
Follow up in any of this. Fox News did a series with Brit Hume and Carl Cameron, which many people have seen in a bootleg version on the internet, but they did it like within weeks, saying, what is this? There was an Israeli spy ring in the United States, and they clearly knew 9/11 was coming. This is Fox News. They pulled that under pressure. They pulled that off the internet. It's not searchable in any Fox News archive, but they aired it. I know the people who did it. Of course, I worked with them for years. They're real people. They're not crazy. In fact, they're pro-Israel, but they had a fact set before them, and they reported it, which is called journalism, and subsequent generations have been forbidden from noting what is now factually true. Those are factually true statements. Now, we tried to interview some of those people. One lives in the United States, in California, and made no headway whatsoever. And we knew as we did it, by the way, that we're going to be attacked as anti-Semites or something.
One of the dancing Israelis lives in California. One of the people that, according to the FBI, seemed to have foreknowledge of 9/11. Oh, God. Maybe I misinterpreted that. We continue. Jesus.
Hello and welcome. PC villains who have dominated news and culture across.
Not only fair, but my moral obligation to find out what the hell was this. And you're calling me names is not going to stop me because I've been here my whole life.
Where debate triumphs over censorship and where common sense is king. You will be shocked by how much you agree with me.
You will be shocked by how much you agree with me. Shout out to Piers
I'm not
Morgan.
an anti-Semite, obviously. I'm not even anti-Israel on some principled level. I'm an American, and I think it's not only fair, but my moral obligation to find out what the hell was this. And you're calling me names is not going to stop me because I've been here my whole life, and my family's been here a long time. I don't have to take orders from you about what I'm allowed to know or not know because it's my country. That's the kind of democratic spirit that informed this country my entire life until 9/11, after which it became a thought crime to ask obvious questions. And I'm just not going to play along, period.
Where do you think we are, Tucker, with the various things that have happened since you and I last spoke in Riyadh, actually, for a really interesting double-header chat. But in particular, what happened with Iran, where...
You notice how he asked that question, like, hey, are you going to dispel all this anti-Semitic stuff about the Israelis being behind it? And then Tucker then goes and quotes the FBI saying that these guys had prior foreknowledge of it, which is kind of bombshelly. They just happen to put a commercial in between the answer, and then once the answer's done, Tucker Pierce just goes on like nothing was said. Like, okay, keep going. Unbelievable.
Donald Trump decided to attack Iran. What did you feel about that? Given that it ended so apparently quickly, do you think Trump was vindicated in his short, sharp strategy there by bombing Iran? Or do you think that this will come back and haunt him down the line?
I don't think it'll come back and haunt him down the line any more than him killing Soleimani is going to haunt him down the line. The fact of the matter is the Iranians understand that there is a disproportionate application of force and power that we will use. We have no problem with killing their civilians and all the rest of it. And they don't want any smoke with the United States of America, especially a Donald Trump United States of America. I don't think anything is going to happen to him for bombing Iran. I never thought it was going to get us to World War III. And if you want to know that I'm telling the truth, go back and look. All during the Soleimani situation, when we assassinated Soleimani and everybody was freaking out talking about World War III, and humble brag, but I predicted exactly what was going to happen, and what I predicted happened exactly. I said, they're not going to do anything. They're going to send a BB gun or something like that, and then they're going to say, ha, they're not going to hurt anybody, and then they're going to say, ha, that's our response, and then we're going to call it good because they're going to have to save face, but they're not going to do anything to us. That's exactly what happened. And guess what happened? We bombed them, blah, 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 and then they hit an empty, we let them hit an empty building, and then we called it good. It was the exact same template. They're afraid of us. We continue.
Well, of course I can't say. I mean, my life is a kind of unbroken chain of bad predictions and embarrassing analysis, and I've been wrong so many times, and I will be in the future without question. However, it's just a fact that events have consequences that we can't foresee, often for years or generations, and I think it's very unwise to use military force without a clear, achievable objective that serves the American national interest. In fact, it's not allowed to use it under any other circumstances. And in that case, I was concerned and remain concerned that this focus on Iran is not actually connected to our national security. How many Shiite terror attacks have there been in the United States in my lifetime? Let me do the math. 0. So don't tell me that the greatest threat we face is Iran. That's a lie. You're telling it on behalf of a foreign power. Maybe they feel the greatest threat they face is Iran. It's not the greatest threat we face. It's not an endorsement of Iran, okay? Doesn't make me a simp for the Shiites. It just makes me an American who's trying to think clearly about what our problems are. And our problems would include tens of millions of foreign nationals living illegally in my country. Nobody knows their identities. They would include a collapsing economy that makes it very hard for my children to have children and live the life that they grew up with and their friends and all American kids. It would include a drug crisis that's killed millions of Americans over the past 20 millions of Americans over the last 20 years. Iran is not even in the top 10 list. So you can scream at me all you want and call me names and call me a bigot or whatever, but there's no evidence to support that. And so if the energy of the US government is focused on a threat that's not the primary threat to us, it is by definition ignoring threats that are. And that's a kind of negligence. And so I pointed that out. I was, roundly attacked. My family was attacked. Whatever. I don't care. It's true. And everyone kind of knows it's true. And being bullied by Ben Shapiro into pretending that it's not true, it's just not on the program for me at 56. I'm just not doing that anymore.
President Trump told reporters at the time that you had called him and apologized after you disagreed with the Israeli strikes on Iran. Is that true?
I am a champion apologizer. I really believe in apologies. I have a lot to apologize for. I always have. We all do. I certainly do. But I also think that, you shouldn't proffer a false apology. You should apologize for things that you did wrong. and I didn't do anything wrong there. And I wasn't attacking anybody. I wasn't attacking Israel. I wasn't attacking. I wasn't attacking. I was merely saying, in my capacity as someone with strong opinions, I think this is an unwise course. And I still think that. It's not an attack on Trump, who I voted for and campaigned for and really like. It's my view. And so that's not something I would apologize for, because it wasn't wrong. It was my duty, and I still believe it. So yeah.
that seems to be a clear repudiation of what he said. That you did not call him to apologize.
No, it's not that. It's just that, look, I said what I said, which wasn't, very complex or sophisticated. It certainly wasn't hate-filled. I don't think this is a wise course. I would never apologize for that because I believe it. I will just be totally honest with you and say, I'm kind of an unpleasant person when I get mad, and like if I'm ever rude, which I often have been to people, that is worth apologizing for, and I'm sorry. I want to preemptively apologize for being a jerk, because I often am. So I would definitely apologize for that. To answer your question, I don't really remember the conversation, but whatever.
Could it have been, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but could it have been you apologized perhaps for the tone of the way you had criticized what Trump had done, rather than apologize for your view of what he did?
Yeah, I mean, I have no idea being as honest as I can be, I have no idea if I actually did that, but if I haven't done that, let me do it now. I apologize to him and everyone else I've snapped at or been mean to.
Okay, that's good.
When we had our little, I thought highly entertaining ding dong in the desert in Saudi Arabia, I enjoyed it. I like people who give it full throttle. I like people who challenge me. I like people who take me on. I like people who can be a bit snappy.
But that's why I've never been mad at you in my life.
Yes,
I know you do. We have exactly the same personality that way. Yeah. So I would never be snappy with you, because you always, I think your views are sincere, you always retain some distance from yourself and from your views, and a sense of humor, and kind of like, I would never, and you do this for a living and you debate for a living, and so I'm not triggered by it, but it's the self-seriousness, it's the self-righteousness of a toad like Ted Cruz that just sets me off. I was elected to the Senate to fight for Israel, and it's like, what? And shut up, anti-Semite. It's like, okay. If you respond to a totally obvious, legitimate question by attacking a man's character, you earn my contempt. You don't behave like that at all. You're like, okay, we have different views. That's all right.
Be quiet.
You don't
trigger me.
You mentioned Ted Cruz. You did raise some eyebrows this week when you said that Hamas is more like a political organization than a terror group. That was on the new episode of your show when you were talking.
I didn't say that. And
he said, I don't know. They seem like a political organization, terror group.
I said that is Hamas a jihadi group?
Well, we'll play the clip, and I'll tell you what Ted Cruz said, because I'd like your response.
Please do.
Here's the clip.
No one can plausibly claim that a Christian family are in Hamas. Okay, so tell me, you can't claim that they're in Hamas while simultaneously claiming that Hamas is a group of jihadis. They're Islamic extremists, which they also claim constantly, which I don't know if that's true, by the way. It seems more like a political organization, but whatever it is, they're telling us constantly they're Al-Qaeda. So it can't also be true that Christians are a member of Al-Qaeda. Sorry.
Yeah.
So then we know they're not in Hamas, so why did they get killed? Why was their church blown up? Why were they killed in that hospital? Like, what is this?
So when you said that, Tucker...
Yeah, the thing that's crazy is that the Israeli apologists, for the last 48 hours, it's like, he said Hamas is a political organization. It's like, the real context was, why were these innocent Christians killed? It's mind-boggling. It's like, I don't know, you can't call these people Hamas. I don't really know what Hamas is, political organization, terrorist organization. And either way, these people were in Hamas. Why were they killed? Oh my gosh, he said Hamas is a political organization. How about we focus on why your military killed a bunch of innocent Christians? We continue.
You said in passing there, you weren't making a different point, but you did say in passing there, they seem more like a political organization. What did you mean by that?
No, I said you can't claim... First of all, the core of it is, why is Israel killing Christians?
Yeah.
Who fund it? Americans fund Israel, fund the IDF. None of this would be possible without the United States and Christians in the United States. So they don't get to kill Christians. They don't get to block access to Christian holy sites. They don't get to allow people to spit on Christian clergy, and they definitely don't get permission from the country that funds them to blow up churches or Christian hospitals. And yet,
but they do. They've been doing that. They've been doing that. I'm sorry, but this is a fact. You're Jewish over there. You convert to Christianity, they will kidnap you, jam you up. You'll wake up in the basement, and some rabbi will deprogram you. I'm not joking. Like, I've had firsthand accounts of this shit.
have a lot. So what the hell is that? And that's my point. And in response, and I've asked that not as a hater of Israel, but as a Christian. So I've asked that pretty persistently for the last few years. I've really been attacked for it, but so what? And the response is, well, they're not actually, they're Hamas. And so my question is, well, you're telling me simultaneously that Hamas is a religious group, they're Islamic extremists, but they also have Christian members? Like, how does that work? It doesn't make any sense at all. That was my point. I'm not endorsing Hamas. I didn't say they're not a terror group. That's a freaking lie. I said...
But now you're talking about whether or not Hamas is a terror group versus talking about why are evangelical Christians supporting a country that takes the money that we give them to convert them into weapons to kill our people? That conversation is not being had. Whether or not Hamas is a terrorist versus a political organization is being had. Watch. Instead of talking about the real issue that we was talking about, let's focus on this picayune detail about whether Hamas is political or terroristic. So now Tucker's in the defense and talking about all this nonsense instead of the main issue, Israel. Why are you killing Christians? And as a Christian, why the fuck would I support a country or a politician that supports a country that uses my tax dollars to kill my people? That's the conversation. And you can see why certain elements would rather have this conversation than that one. We continue.
If you're telling me they're a jihadi group, they're political extremist groups, by the way. Fatah, there were tons of Arab political terror groups that were secular, that did have Christians in them, by the way, a lot of Christians, who were displaced in 1948 and they were radical or whatever. But do you see what I'm saying? There's like a childish internal contradiction there and now they don't want to deal with it, so it's like, shut up, Hamas supporters.
Yeah, I think what got people going.
You stop killing Christians. You're not allowed to do that.
I understood the bigger
point.
What
is that?
Yeah, listen,
what's the justification for that?
I understood the bigger point you were making, like I said.
I'm a Christian. I don't have to put up with this anymore. I don't have to sit back and be like, all these Christian ministers in the United States are like, oh, shut up.
Thank you.
We can't complain about a government that we fund killing Christians. I don't know who's writing the rules here, but I'm not obeying them. I'm not attacking Israel. I'm not an anti-Semite.
Good, Tucker. Good, Tucker. Exactly. The real issue is y'all out here, and I've got nuns and priests saying, hey, we're not evacuating nothing because people are coming to our churches for refuge and we're not going to abandon them. And if you do something to them people, it's going to be hell to pay, bro. Period. I'm a Christian. I don't care about none of this stuff about whether or not he classified Hamas as terrorist. I don't care. Now look, I said this yesterday. If anybody's supposed to die, Christians are supposed to die. Okay? Having said that, nobody's supposed to die. And you can't ask me to be cool with my money going to kill my folks. I don't give a fuck about how Hamas and the rest of them get classified, bro.
Don't get to kill Christians who have nothing to do with this. It's the world's only religion that is not only non-violent, but considers retaliation a sin. Turn the other cheek. That's the religion. So why are you killing these people?
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Good job, Tucker. See, you got to get an intelligence guy to recognize these intelligence tactics, right? So he's not going for the red herring. You notice how Piers wants to push this topic, but when he asked about the dancing Israelis and Tucker gave him evidence about the dancing Israelis, he fled from it like immediately. Interesting. We continue.
I
Give me a
understand.
straight answer.
Yeah,
And calling me names is not going to deter me.
I understand the bigger point you made, but like I said, you definitely say
it's
you
the
definitely,
only point I'm
you
making.
definitely said in passing that they seem more like a political organisation. So do you want to clarify what you meant by that bit?
I'm saying a funded by Israel political association, by the way.
Thank you.
Sure.
Hamas was funded by
you.
Israel to some extent. It's not a controversial statement. It's not a conspiracy theory. It's an established fact by the current prime minister. Took money, gave it to Hamas. I meant what I said, which is they are either, I'm not questioning whether they've committed violence. They have. I'm opposed to that. I'm opposed to all violence, period. And I'm opposed to Hamas violence. I'm opposed to killing people. The question is, if you are telling me that they are inspired to kill because of their religious ideology, that is a different thing from people who are inspired to kill by their political ideology. Because if it's political, you can imagine an alliance with Christians. If it is a religious...
Then did you see the apostate prophet crash out and spare the Orthodox nun who went on Tucker Carlson, went off complete office rocker and made an AI image, claimed she defended Hamas? Yeah, I mean, look, apostate prophet, David Wood, all those guys, they're in Islamic apologetics. They're at war with Muslims all the time. Muslims are threatening to kill them. One of them's been stabbed, all the rest of it, you know. I mean, I understand when you've been in Islamic apologetics, you know, I mean, you know I have. They get very, I mean, Islam is not a peaceful religion. They're just not. I'm not going to lie. They're not. Everybody knows I love them, but they're not. And the Muslims have been having a very bad 2 years in the apologetics space. They've not been doing good in the last 2 years in the apologetic space. And so when you're at war and all the rest of it, people do and say things that, you know, whatever. So, yeah. I'm glad apostate prophet has converted to Christianity, but that's how I interpret that. I interpret that as these people are at war with Muslims, and so they're automatically going to be, you know, against anybody that supports what they consider to be Islamic. We continue.
Motivation. It is impossible to imagine, as I said in that clip, Christian accomplices. There weren't a lot of Christians supporting Al-Qaeda because Al-Qaeda was explicitly anti-Christian. So was ISIS. Fatah, which was, again, a radical or violence-prone Palestinian political organization, had Christian support. So which is it? That's my point. I was calling into question their lack of a coherent explanation for why Christians are being killed in a conflict that, from my perspective, doesn't seem to have anything to do with them.
Do you
Why are
view
you desecrating churches?
Do you view
well done.
Hamas as a terrorist organization, as they've been prescribed in many countries, including the US?
I view Hamas killing people, especially civilians, as horrifying, immoral, and wrong. And if you think you're going to get me into some semantic game about who's a terrorist and who's not a terrorist, killing people who committed no crime is wrong. Period. That's the basis of Christian belief. It's the basis of Western civilization. Wow. Dropping bombs on people who did nothing wrong is a crime. Period. That is why we say we are better than the terrorists, because we don't kill people who did nothing wrong. And by definition, children haven't done anything wrong. So you are not allowed to kill them. And now there's an entire network of, not a television network, but a loosely aligned network, arguing that it's somehow wrong to say it's immoral to kill children. And I think it's immoral to kill children no matter who kills the children, whether it's the...
Woo! Tucker! What is happening? Whew! Like I said, you can't trust him because he's a spook, but wow. Yes! Stop with the freaking red herrings and trying to get us away from the main point. That's what I said yesterday. Who has more bodies? Hamas? Let me ask this question. Hamas, Hezbollah, Al-Qaeda? Who's got more bodies? IDF has more bodies than those three people I named combined times 20. Terrorism.
Government of the United States, the government of Sri Lanka.
That's right, Chris. Chris says, same with Israel killing citizens, America killing citizens, or any other nations. Correct. And on top of civilians, by the way. I will also say, specifically talking about America, okay? If I show up to your house, all right, with a 9mm, and I break down your door, and you, because you're a man, you go to protect your house, but all you have is a baseball bat, and you meet me at the door with a baseball bat, and I blow you away, yes, you were a combatant, I'm still an evil motherfucker for killing you. Why am I saying that? Because, yes, we killed 1 million civilians in Iraq, Afghanistan, and all that during the GWAT. But here's my question. What about the people we killed that fought back? We invaded their country. We had people in Gore-Tex and all the rest of it with the souped up, looking like super soldiers, shooting at people with fucking unsighted AK-47s and fucking sandals. The line between civilian and combatant is almost equivalent at that point. So yes, we've terrorized the fucking Middle East. We, America. And then our little brother Israel has also terrorized them. So yes, if you want to tell, the minute you tell me that America is a terrorist state, that Israel is a terrorist state, I will gladly give you the terrorist word for Hamas. Gladly.
The government of Belgium, the government of Israel, Hamas, it doesn't matter. It is immoral to kill people who haven't done anything wrong. That's why Hiroshima is a problem. That's why I've complained about Hiroshima. That's why the Nazis were bad.
Dresden.
That's why everybody who murders innocents is wrong. And when did that become controversial? Like I said, I articulated that and was immediately attacked by all these, people on the so-called right. I was like, then what is the whole point? What is the point of living here or having this country if we endorse murdering people who committed no crime? How are we better than the people we supposedly hate? You can't get an answer. Oh, you're a radical jihadi. No, actually, I'm a Protestant Christian who hates radical jihadis. Like, I don't even know what you're talking about. Anyway, that's it. That's the distinction. And by the way, the designation of terrorism grows from that understanding, which was a common understanding before 9/11. If you kill people intentionally who've committed no crime, you are the criminal. And who does that? Terrorists. That's why we call them terrorists.
Right? Terrorism is committing crimes purposely against a civilian population in order to influence the government of that population to do a particular thing. So when we bomb the shit out of these kids and their mothers so that we could destroy their will, so that we could distribute them to Cyprus, Jordan, Somaliland, etc., 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 so that these settlers, because they believe God told them that the land is theirs, can go in there and sit on beachfront property and drink Mai Tais while they've erected a kingdom on the bones and the flesh and the blood and the tears of these people. You want me to participate in that and not say anything? You're out of your fucking mind, bro.
So, I'm happy to call anyone who does that a terrorist. That's my definition. That was our working definition before 9/11, and then it just became the people our political class doesn't like. And I was called a terrorist yesterday. You're a terrorist, okay, because I espouse nonviolence, which is the basis. It's the basis of Western civilization that you punish only the guilty.
But I'm trying to work out.
Get out of my country.
Do you actually think then that Hamas are terrorists or not?
I think any organization that kills the innocent, including Hamas, is a terror organization.
Got it. Okay.
What I object to, and I just want to be as clear as I possibly can, what I object to is the proceeding with the conversation without the defining of terms. The purpose of language is to convey specific ideas. And so in order to have a conversation, you have to define what you're talking about. If I were to throw a couple Korean terms in and refuse to tell you what they mean, we couldn't have a conversation because you don't speak Korean. And so I want to define terrorism, and I'm going to do it very precisely. Terrorism is the act of murdering the innocent. If you murder the innocent, you are engaged in terrorism. And that would include, in specific cases I can think of, Hamas, which has murdered the innocent, people at a music festival. I mean, what? That is terrorism. Anybody who murders people who committed no crime is committing terrorism.
Does that include...
And if someone else can think
Does that include...
of
okay, so does that include Israel?
It includes anybody.
Does that include Israel?
It includes anybody.
No, but
anybody. But by the way, let me just say, it's so funny. Does that include Israel? It includes people I know personally in the United States. I know a lot of people who have okayed the order. I know in some cases people who participated in carrying out the order to murder people who committed no crime. Does that mean they're terrorists? I don't know. I'll let God figure out what that means. It means they're committing acts of terror. That is terrorism. Because the point of it is not to punish the guilty. The point of it is to inspire fear. The point of it is to depopulate a place, move a population, whatever the point of it is. The effect of it is to punish people who've committed no crime. And in our system, the Western system, which is very distinct from the Eastern system, very distinct, and it's distinct on this one precise point, we believe, and have always believed since this country was founded, since your country became, not a pure monarchy, but even when it was a pure monarchy, the belief in the West, because of Christianity, was the worst thing you can do is punish the innocent. That's the worst thing you can do. That's worse than not punishing the guilty. And we often said that to each other. We no longer say that because there is a pretty concerted effort to blur the meaning of these terms. But I'm not going to be deterred from...
That's right. That used to be a conundrum, and the consensus was it is better. It was sort of like, the conversation about the death penalty, right? Like, is it better that an evil murderer go free or an innocent person gets killed? And the consensus was it's better for the evil murderer to go free than an innocent person to get killed. That was the consensus agreement in this country. And now it's not, obviously.
Finding words precisely. Terror is murdering people, killing people, punishing people who committed no crime. Period.
So when the Israeli government says it has repeatedly that even though over 20,000 completely innocent children are believed to have died in their response to what Hamas did on October the 7th at the hands of the IDF, there are many on the pro-Palestinian side who say that Israel is behaving like terrorists too in the way that they have gone about conducting this war. Would you go as far as to say that?
One of the things that I really object to now is this relentless focus on Israel, which, by the way, is a foreign country that I have nothing to do with other than having been a visitor there and really enjoyed it. And it's now at the center.
You've got like 75 of the last 130 episodes, Tucker, have been about Israel. Like, what are you talking? It's such a weird, he's so weird, bro. Oh, no. And I don't understand why, you just went on this beautiful soliloquy about all that, and you're saying that they're targeting innocent Christians and they're sniping kids in the back of the head. That's but you're hesitant to say that they're a terrorist state. These are the things I don't understand. What are we doing here? Of course it's terror. Yes, they're terrorists. The IDF are terrorists. What's the problem?
The conversation in my country, when my country is degrading at high speed, we have a lot of concerns here. I just resent the kind of solipsism that pulls everything back to the concerns of a foreign country, and that's the litmus test for everything. Well, is Israel bad? How dare you say that? Are you going to go out on a limb and criticize Israel? What about my country? Every country commits terror because leaders, drunk on hubris, imagine that they can do things that no human being is permitted to do. And first on that list is killing people who didn't do anything wrong. That is the ultimate sin. And it happens in every country, in every period. Of course, Israel meets that definition. I mean, obviously, but so does my government. And not always. And I think we try harder. Certainly, we try harder than Israel is trying. But we have definitely done that. And it's not controversial to say that. It's not controversial to say that things the U.S. government has done have intentionally murdered people who didn't do anything wrong. People are like, yeah, that's right. But you say that about Benjamin Netanyahu, who has nothing to do with me at all. I don't live there. I don't want to live there. I've got nothing to do with that. Then you're somehow a criminal. That whole frame to me is insane, and I'm not participating with it. Israel is not the litmus test. How you feel about your own country, what you do to improve or degrade your own country, that's the litmus test for me. Not how you feel about some foreign country, period.
Well,
So
let me talk about my country for a moment, because again, when we had our doubleheader in Riyadh, you talked pretty scathingly about the UK, and I put up I think a pretty good fist of a defence. But something happened last week that made me think, my God, Tucker was probably right. And I'll tell you what it was, the tipping point for me. And there's been a lot of this going on. But when a comedian called Graham Linehan returns to the UK and is arrested by 5 armed police officers at Heathrow Airport over 3 joke tweets that he posted in April, I literally thought my country had gone berserk and was now, when it came to free speech, bordering.
What? They arrested him? Who is this now? Graham Linehan? What did he do? Oh my God. Linehan arrested? Later, Jesse. Have a good one. Don't worry about it. Thank you for hanging out. I'm going to be out of here pretty soon anyway. I got a football game going on. We continue. Holy smokes. Arrested?
North Korea. So, Tucker Carlson, I would like to say you were onto something when we spoke in Riyadh, because it was so shocking to me that in a democratic society like the United Kingdom, built on free speech like the United States, that this could happen. And that it did happen. And this guy was taken off to cells. Arrested. I mean, quite extraordinary to me.
Did you notice when they were arresting people for praying outside of abortion clinics? I mean, I do think the UK, and I say this as...
Yeah, I know very well about that. Shout out to Janet Mills.
You know, someone who is half English. I think it's like reached, or it is quickly reaching a point where democratic reforms are going to be pretty tough because of the demographic change. And that, of course, the point of importing all these people is to...
I have no idea. When he says democratic, I think reforms are going to be tough because of the demographic change. He's talking about the immigration thing over there. And I'm assuming he's talking about the Asian and the East Asian, Pakistani, Islamic grooming gangs and all the other stuff that's going on over there. I think they're fucked, man. I think it's over with. You listen, the only thing that's positive about the period we're in is like this whole idea of postmodernism is dead. The idea that you can have your truth, I can have my truth. They can be completely contradictory and completely valid simultaneously. You know, it's rude to say that anybody's perspective is wrong. Okay, but I keep asking you, what if my perspective is that my perspective should dominate the world? And you say you can't say that I'm wrong. That's what's happening over in the UK. Allahu Akbar.
To overwhelm the people who live there who disapprove of the programs. You don't have to care what they think because you just bring in new people and their will becomes like all that matters. And so I don't think you're going to fix these things through elections.
Although, I don't think the Islamic community would have a problem with making jokes against the trans community. But they obviously, free speech is not a value in Islam. Disrespecting the Prophet is not a value in Islam. And so they're going to support that action for that reason. We continue.
At some point, probably pretty soon. And I just worry a place like the UK, Canada is another, a bunch of different countries in the West are at the point where they're literally revolutionary. They are poised for revolution. And as someone who really doesn't support revolution and hates violence and hates civil war above all, I'm worried about that. I mean, I don't see how this is fixed. Starmer, who's, you know, he's just an instrument of larger forces, but he's a poisonous character, obviously, who's really hurt your country. He's in there for, 4 more years? And so you wonder, like, people are going to start to get really radical in a scary way. Like, I think this is going to happen. And the people in charge don't seem to care.
Well, you're already seeing it. You are seeing the anger beginning to manifest itself, and I completely understand the anger. I don't like you. I abhor any form of violence, but I do understand the anger when you have Keir Starmer campaigned, I'm going to smash the gangs that allow these little boats to come over the channel, delivering tens of thousands of people illegally into the country. And they then get put into these so-called asylum hotels where they're given a pretty good lifestyle. Certainly a far better lifestyle than many people really struggling at the moment in the UK. And of course, far from smashing the gangs, it turned out yesterday that he's smashing new records for the number of people coming in illegally on the boats.
Of course.
It's out of control. And the British
legally,
public are reaching a point of
So,
saying,
like,
we
what is this?
are done with people coming in illegally and being treated better in a more comfortable and more luxurious manner than we treat our own people.
This is what happened to the Democrats in Chicago, where because Biden so horribly and incompetently mismanaged that issue, you had kids in Chicago that got displaced, weren't able to go to school, so that immigrants could go to school. And then the immigrants there began to form gangs to go after the regular people of Chicago. All these black people going, man, fuck all of you Democrat, blah, 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 blah. And look, I'm not a Republican. Republicans have serious problems, but and look, my position is that as a Christian, look, it's just impossible for me to say anything other than we have to welcome the stranger, period. But that's my Christianity. Right? Like, the Christianity I follow also says, like, you're not supposed to respond to violent attacks. That is very difficult to square with human nature. So this stuff is like, it's just human nature, man. Like, you can't take people that aren't from your country, bring them in here, displace the people that were there, and treat those people better to the point where they get arrogant enough to start grooming gangs in the UK or actual drug operations over there in Chicago. Like, it's just not going to work. And at some level, I'm like, there is no way that these very intelligent people cannot see how that's not going to foment some serious issues, or if it's just Kamala and the rest of them, or I don't know who this guy is over in the UK thinking that he's fancy or whatever. I don't know, bro.
Well, the whole point is to humiliate and degrade the indigenous population of the British Isles, the white population. I mean, that's the whole point. And are they really going to do something about it? What would that be exactly? You'd really have to force a lot of people to go back to their countries of origin, millions of people, and you need to do it really soon. And are they actually willing to do that? I don't know. But
This is where Tucker's dark. See, this is why Tucker doesn't want revolution, because I think white people like 8% of the planet. White people are very, very, very concerned about their numbers right now. So I'm laughing, but that's dangerous, because when people like that get concerned, people die in bunches, man. So I don't know. We're in interesting times. We continue.
these are existential questions that we have been browbeat into ignoring for decades. But the question is, like, is Ireland Ireland? If it's majority non-Irish? Oh, shut up, they're Irish. No, they're actually not Irish. Same with the UK, same with England, Scotland, Wales. Like, it's all changing so fast. Nothing like this has ever happened in all of history, except when, say, the Mongols swept across the steppe and raped everybody. Like, that was true demographic change on this scale. But even that wasn't as profound as what we're seeing in every white country around the world. I would say the West, but Australia and New Zealand also. So, like, what is that? Now, my brain is not big enough to understand what that is. I have a lot of theories about it, but I don't know if they're true.
Here's a couple theories. When the Western world spends the last, 65 years of raping, torturing, extracting minerals, extracting materials, generating proxy wars, getting into pissing contests with places like Russia, and then initiating all kinds of global wars and things like that, the vast majority of the people on the planet are not white, Tucker. So when you make life so uninhabitable for the rest of the planet, and the rest of the planet is not white, then you're going to have an immigration crisis. If you'd have left these people alone, you'd have an argument. But you didn't. You spent the last 65 to 100 years trouncing through the earth, reorienting the map, doing all types of shit, and assuming that you were gonna make life hell after you just raped all the resources from the given people. All of a sudden now they're gonna what? Stay in their country while you live in luxury? You know what else is interesting about people like Tucker Carlson? They never say the white population needs to get the fuck out of South Africa. They don't say that. Sorry, Tucker, but you could say white. You're the one that brought race into it, not me. I'll say the Western world because we took part in it. If you're here's the thing, and here's the thing that's really interesting to me about the West. The white folks in the West will deploy brown people to execute their affairs, like the Marine Corps and all the rest of it, right? You'll deploy brown people to fight for you to establish your dominance in the given countries all over the world. And then when the fallout from that happens and all the people in all these countries start immigrating because you've made the place unlivable, now all of a sudden you want a pure white utopia again. It turns out, Tucker, actions have consequences. We continue.
Is what the numbers are. And that's real. And no one feels that he can say it. Everyone's like, oh, well, if that were happening in China or India or Malaysia or Senegal, it doesn't matter. You'd be like, what the hell is that? Like, the population's totally different. Look at graduation. Pick, King's College Law School, and look at the graduation picture for the last 30 years. Who's in it? Just like, let your eyes tell you the truth for once. Like, this is a total change in population. Is it
True.
better? Is it worse? Can't have that conversation. Who's pushing this?
Well, better or worse is a for who discussion. If you want to keep the Anglo-Saxon status quo, then obviously it's worse. I don't think Tucker's a terrible person for wanting to maintain white supremacy. He's white.
Population want it. Population clearly doesn't want it. There's no polling that's meaningful on the subject. There's no referendum on it. You don't get to decide. You've got no voice in it, other than you get to go to jail if you complain loudly enough about it. What is this? I think it's the biggest and darkest thing that has happened in the last 1,000 years, for sure. And I think
it's the dark. It's the darkest thing that's happened in 1,000 years. I would say I don't think it's the darkest thing that's happened in 1,000 years, Tucker. I think the transatlantic slave trade was a pretty dark situation. I think the Holocaust is a pretty dark situation. I think the killing fields is a pretty dark situation. I think apartheid is a pretty dark situation. I think what the Palestinians have been going through since 1948 has been a pretty dark situation. I don't think brown people immigrating to white countries because white people have absolutely fucking destroyed their environment. I don't think that is... I don't think that's equivalent. We continue. Holy shit, Tucker.
Leading somewhere really, really bad. It's not happening by accident, that's obvious, because it's only happening in white countries.
I think that...
And he doesn't get it. Why is it only happening in white countries, Tucker? How come? And which white countries, Tucker?
White
supremacist? Well, in fact, I'm not a white supremacist.
Well,
I'm just noticing what the hell's going on.
I think most people I've spoken to about this in the UK...
He is absolutely
people have always...
a white supremacist in the sense that he wants white people to be supreme in certain contexts. And I do not think that is something uniquely evil. I think the only thing unique about what Tucker's saying is that he is saying it out loud. Why people have to be penalized for their humanity is ridiculous. Okay? It is human nature to look at your image in the mirror and be the most comfortable and want that image exalted and in a superior position over everybody else. That's just human nature. And it is also human nature to love the fact and be comfortable with the fact that your image is superior at the top of the pile. And then when you look around and you see that your children are now going to have to compete, like that dude in El Paso who killed everybody. He said, man, Mexicans are so smart, and the jobs that we were just going to walk into, now we're going to have to compete with these people, and I want to shoot a bunch of them to encourage them to stay on the other side of the border. That is not crazy. It's evil, it's horrible, but it's not crazy. Tucker's weak, and he's fearful for his son, and he knows, that's the other thing when you're in the State Department. He knows what happens to minorities. And he knows what happens when demographics change. That's what's going on. And if you were a person, see, the problem is that people like Tucker do not understand. Well, let me say it this way. White people in the main, especially Republican white people, they have spent so much time denying black suffering that they don't really have an understanding of what it's like to be a minority. But then when you get a guy like Tucker Carlson, who's actually a world person, who actually knows the world and actually understands what life is like as a minority, and actually understands that the complaints that we have had were never bullshit. The complaints we had were never bullshit. Tucker knows that. And he doesn't want to be in a situation where the roles get reversed. That's all that's happening. And there's nothing wrong with Tucker for being in that situation and saying those things and being honest about it. There's nothing wrong with him about it. In the sense of like particularly evil or a particular white supremacist. I got a lot of like white liberal friends who are like, oh, this is terrible, that absolutely agree with Tucker and want the country to remain majority white. They're just not going to say it for obvious reasons.
Viewed the UK to be a very tolerant, multicultural, cosmopolitan place to live. That's why so many people want to come here. And people have no problem with that. And it's been very successful for a long period of time.
Wait, it's multicultural? What does that mean?
We have a lot of different people from different countries, different cultures, and it's always worked historically.
So is Sharia law in a multicultural country, is Sharia law every bit as valid?
Now here it is again. So this is the thing with right-wingers. They don't like multiculturalism. Can I ask you a question, dear listener? Do you think that the culture in Astoria, Queens, around a bunch of Jewish people, white Europeans, and the culture in Fresno, California, and the culture in Butte, Montana, and the culture in Arlington, Texas, I take all those places that I just named. I get a bunch of white people from all those places, right? And put them in a room. Are they exactly the same culture? They're using different language, different words, and things mean different things. Sometimes the same words mean opposite things, etc., etc., etc. Tucker and people like him have no problem with multiculturalism, because America is full of multiculturalism. Look at the menu of America. What is a standard American dish, right? They don't have a problem with multiculturalism. They have a problem with brown culture. They don't want brown culture as part of the multiculturalism. That's the problem. So when he says, what do you mean multicultural? I thought you guys were English. He's like, well, we're okay with it. Multiculturalism is a bad thing for these folks, and they're afraid.
Is English common?
No, people don't want Sharia law here. No.
A lot of people do. Wait, hold on. I don't know what you mean. Multiculturalism itself is a lie designed to subvert a society. No, a society has a culture.
What do you mean subvert a society? Which society, Tucker?
Sure, we can argue about what it is or ought to be. It's not necessarily the same as race. It's connected to race, but it's not the same. People from different...
Then a lot of these white identitarians I see on Twitter claim they just want to have their own culture, just like black people have their own culture. Well, black people, what do you mean by black people have their own culture? What does that mean? Does a guy in the Bronx, New York, have the exact same culture as a guy in Compton, California? I could tell you for a fact that's not the case. And I just said in my little thing, like you take a white guy from Fresno, California, a white guy from Arlington, Texas, white guy from Butte, Montana, white guy from Astoria, Queens. You put them all in a room. They're all different. They all have different cultures, right? They all have different cultural markers. So culture is something that happens with groups. Anytime groups of people get together, you're going to have multiculturalism. There is no monolithic culture on anything at all. As in the nation of Africa. Ridiculous. There is no such... I love you, Hunter, but there's no such thing as a nation of Africa. Africa is a continent. Right? There's no universal African culture. That's like saying the nation of Europe. What are we talking about here? We continue.
Races can buy into your culture. That was kind of the beauty of the West. But a multicultural society is not sustainable. There's never been such a thing.
But your society is
one
about
culture will dominate.
Hang on, Tucker. Surely the United States of America, given the very way it was created, is the epitome of a multicultural society. And my point I was going to make to you was...
It's absolutely not. No. It's a multiracial society.
Yeah.
Though it was not actually a multiracial society up until pretty recent. It was just like 90% white for most of its existence, but whatever. But you did have different...
What does white mean? Initially, Italians weren't white. They had to earn their whiteness. Jews had to earn their whiteness. The Irish had to earn their whiteness. They were not just looked upon. There wasn't just this... This is what I'm talking about. There wasn't just this, massive white people, and that was America. And now fuck, here come the Democrats and all the brown people. That's not what happened, bruh. That's not what happened. The initial folks in your country understood that even though the Italian person's skin was white, he was from a completely different culture. We didn't like his pizza. We didn't like his spaghetti. We used to call Italians meatballs. White people used to call Italians meatballs. No, it was not majority white. The Italians had to go out and say, "Hey, we're here," blah blah blah. Then they joined the police force with the Irish and said, "We'll go after the blacks." That's how they earned their whiteness. Stop this, Tucker. This overly simplistic view of the world is ridiculous. We continue.
Peoples, you had different religions. That was all totally fine, but there was one culture, as American culture. There's no such thing as a multicultural society. It's not sustainable. One culture will overwhelm the other. Again, it's not the same as race. It's not identical to race. It's connected, but it's not the same. But multiculturalism is by definition insane. No, it's never happened. It never will happen. One culture will predominate. It will impose its values on everybody else. I mean, the gay thing, which was not a thing 40 years ago, gay was a slur, all of a sudden becomes mandatory to worship at the altar of gayness or whatever. Trans stuff, sodomy, pride, all this stuff. That was not a thing 40 years ago. We're the same age. You know that. It was reviled. Now it's beloved. That's a culture change, but it's not multicultural.
I don't think you have to.
No, that we absolutely have, especially relative to the LGBT. Are you trying to say that the LGBT don't have a culture? That it's not a subculture within America? We have one culture. I don't know. He's got to do some more time.
Dissent. Although you can't dissent from it.
Yeah, but
you're not allowed to dissent from it.
But
if you're I think sodomy's wrong. How does that work for you?
Look,
you go to jail in your country.
Well, what's happened with the gay thing, as you put it, is that actually we were an extremely homophobic society. It was only legal to be gay from the mid-60s in the United Kingdom, and I'm very glad I now live in a country where it's perfectly legal to do that.
No, so you buy the culture. You buy. Okay,
it's not
I'm
a culture.
Not even
I buy
attacking
people's
that.
right.
You obviously
I buy
are
people's
fully...
right to have their own sexuality. My argument with the
culture. That's
well, my argument with the trans.
Wait, but that's never happened. That's never happened in the history of your country.
Well, the trans debate's different to the gay debate.
It's not different. It's not.
It is.
No, it's not.
Is.
Look, I'm not attacking gays. I'm not attacking trans. No, I'm making a larger point that I know that you are capable of grasping, which is that these are cultural determinations. We decide what our culture is, what are our values, and that definition changes.
But it wasn't black people that pushed out the LGBT movement, bruh. As I said a couple years ago when I was trying to talk some sense into the trans community, you know how I know that? I said, guys, your movement is going to absolutely and totally destroy itself because you're 1% of the population. And you guys are functioning with the same privilege that you were born with. The vast majority of activists in the trans world, Blair Wildey, they're all white. Y'all brought that to the culture, not us. I mean, to be honest, Tucker, to our shame, it's black culture that's still holding the line with homophobia. So are we more part of American culture than white people? Are white people the harbingers of the destruction of American culture? Because you guys are the ones that promoted all the LGBT stuff, which you call sodomy? Unbelievable.
So your country, let's just say its inception, modern England, 1066. The Normans come in, the French, who are actually Norse, but whatever, they come in, they invade your country, they impregnate your women, they put themselves in charge, they take all the castles. That's 1,000 years, okay? During that...
They impregnate your women. That's what be happening. That's what be happening when they see this. That's why they get so mad. They impregnate your women. Yeah, we do. We enjoy it.
Entire period, it was not okay to be gay until, as you said, 1966 or whatever. Oscar Wilde went to jail for it. So you have 1,000 years versus 60 years. Your culture changed, but there's only one culture. It went from being totally unacceptable.
Yeah, but Tucker, that wasn't the Muslims. This is like a really disjointed, terrible argument. His main concern, the main concern by people like Tucker relative to Europe, are the Muslims. The Muslims are not pushing the LGBT agenda, Tucker. Who's out there pushing the LGBT agenda over there in the Western world is y'all.
To be gay, to being mandatory to love gays.
It wasn't mandatory to love gays.
It is mandatory to love gays, especially as a Christian. The scripture says you're supposed to love your neighbor as yourself. Of course I'm gonna love the gays. What happens if one of your kids is gay, Tucker? What if your kid who's currently working in the U.S. State Department or whatever, what if he turns out to be a little fruity? You're gonna disown? You're gonna stop loving him? Obviously not. So what do we talk? What you're melting down here, bro?
In that,
it's not mandatory to love
gays.
It
is absolutely mandatory to love gays.
You can have a view.
Really? What would happen? What would happen if you stood up in Parliament or on a television show in Great Britain and said, basically just describe what the average Victorian or even Edwardian thought of homosexuality? Or just read Oscar Wilde's indictment, but agreed with it. You'd lose your job. You might go to jail. There's not a multicultural there. There's one culture. And it's required. And that's true in every society because a culture is a commonly agreed upon set of values, which in their firmest form are called laws.
But those values can evolve.
This is true everywhere
but those values can evolve.
Of course they evolve, but there's only one set of them.
Look,
it's not multicultural. There's one set.
Yes, but
Where is that? Tucker claims to be a Christian. You know, in the end of the world, when everything is finished, right? It says, we're all around the throne because we all made it. He says, John says, I saw people from every tribe, tongue, which is the number one marker of culture, kingdom and nation around the throne. Heaven, which Tucker, or the new world of which I believe that Tucker is a citizen, is absolutely a multicultural endeavor. Tucker, la ilaha illallah. We continue.
In every society, sorry.
But your country's values were established by the United States Constitution, and that's had, 27 amendments? Right, so your own values, as determined by the founding fathers, they have evolved and been changed to accommodate changing time.
Dude, there's no doubt. Look, I'm not even arguing against change. That's natural. It's natural that people's views evolve.
So the culture changes.
Once you start rejecting the laws of nature, then you're doomed. But let me just say, no, of course, societies change. I get it. All I'm saying, I'm making a very discrete, specific point, which is multiculturalism.
Ooh, it's a good point by Hunter. What's strange about right-wing immigration is that they would rather have a white person in the USA who is an atheist and believes in liberal ideology than a brown Arabic Christian who completely agrees with their ideology but isn't white. Correct. Sadaqta, as they say. We continue.
As an idea, is laughably stupid. It has never worked. We never had it anywhere, and it never will exist because it's contrary to human nature. One culture, one way of looking at things, one worldview will predominate, and it will punish all who deviate from it. That is the nature of societies. So if you're telling me it's multicultural, we can all live and like have radically...
Right. And speech is the means by which we measure whether we want to adopt or reject an ideology relative to the culture, which is why free speech is so important, because it gives everybody, it democratizes the ability for a change to be happen without blood. Okay? So that's why free speech is important.
Different values, that's just not true. It's never been true. It never will be true. So you're
Actually,
having one culture, one worldview predominate over another and dominate and suppress all dissent. Like, that's just what it is, dude.
But I would point...
Whoa. So he just says it is inevitable that one culture will dominate and oppress and suppress another culture. But then earlier he was complaining that he was being dominated and suppressed, and he was saying that tyranny was bad. But now it looks like he's saying tyranny is inevitable. So what is it, Tucker? Tyranny is bad when the Jews are telling white people what to do and say and think. But tyranny is good if white people tell brown people what to do and say and think, because it's just inevitable. Oh my God.
I would point to the United States of America and the United Kingdom as two shining examples, albeit not completely without their flaws, but shining examples of places that are deemed by the rest of the world to be not only multicultural, but very tolerant of other people's cultures in a way that has enriched their society. I certainly feel that about my country.
Well, I certainly think that inherent in Christianity is the notion of tolerance, and that draws from a core Christian concept, which is free will. You cannot force someone to convert. There's never been conversion by the sword in Christianity. People decide to believe in it. And so that is central to the religion, therefore it's been central to the society. Western civilization is Christian civilization. And so we call that tolerance. It's a respect for your inherent God-given right to make a choice.
What do you mean there's never been a conversion at the sword? I mean, maybe I need to do more research, but I'm pretty sure the Crusades and the Inquisition was forms of forced conversion. No?
About what you believe, okay? So, of course, that's always been a feature. My only point is, a society has a commonly agreed upon set of beliefs, rules, and laws that are the definition of the society itself. That's what a society is. So you can't have competing. You can't have, gay world and Sharia world living co-equally in a society. That does not.
But you can have gay world and Christian world. You can have secular world and Christian world. You can have dominant democratic Christianity and a whole bunch of other worlds living and coexisting with one another. No problem. Literally, what he's talking about right here is almost the primary argument against America in total, because the idea was you had all these different states that were able to come up with all their different laws, but we were united at the federal level. But when this country first started, it was very, Virginia's over here, we're over here, we're over here, a law, a norm, a custom that works in Virginia is not going to work in Boston. That's the way it was designed. So beyond multiculturalism, it was multi-statism that had not only its own culture, but its own actual laws. That's how initially it was supposed to work. So not only did they accept this, they systematized this and then created the entire country out of it. So what he's talking about here is totally racial. It is not cultural. It's racial.
Happen. It will never happen. You have to pick one. Are we the Sharia society? Are we the party time gay rights society? Like, which one? And you can't face that reality. So you're just sort of snoozing along until the inevitable point where you're going to wake up and be like, my values have no bearing on what our society is anymore, because we've been invaded by other people with a totally different worldview, and they're now in charge. And that day is coming very soon for your country, and maybe it'll improve it. I don't think the UK could be a lot worse than it already is. It's this kind of
Look at Tucker. Tucker's terrorized. You know why? Listen, man. I think that Tucker, Piers. Look at Piers. He looks terrified. I think Piers pretty much agrees with Tucker, but wants to believe that he's better than that. But I think these people are afraid. And I think that with the advent of social media and things like that, the world has become a lot more small, and folks start to realize, holy shit, there's a lot of brown people on the planet. What are we gonna do? And I think they're terrified because it's the same thing I said to my trans friends. This is a matter of mathematics. You are 1% of the country. If you keep pushing shit to the line, it's gonna refract against you. I think you guys are 8% of the planet. You can't keep trouncing through the planet without consequence. Here's the consequence, and now they're afraid. Both of them. Look at this looks like absolute and total fear in the face of both of these two people. Like, he is not happy with the implications of what Tucker is saying. Holy smokes. Look at this. We continue.
disgusting, sad, self-hating, suicidal island that was once great. It kills me to see it as a half-English person. But that day is coming. It will change. You will either decide to be Western or Eastern. That's a choice that we're all.
He took a deep swallow there. No, it's not between Western and Eastern. Tucker is saying you're gonna choose between white or brown. That's what he's saying. That's what he's saying.
Going to face. I don't want to face that choice, but it's being foisted upon us by the architects of mass migration. Sorry.
I would question your characterization as my country as a sad, disgusting, what was the rest of it, suicidal nation. I feel none of those things. I feel very happy to be in the United Kingdom, and I feel that there are lots of very happy people like me who are neither disgusting or sad or suicidal. But Tucker Carlson, it is always great to talk to you.
I agree with that.
I would like to remind
Morgan,
my viewers that your 9/11 documentary series, the first episode is posted...
9/11, aptly so.
Yeah. Tucker, thank you very much indeed for coming on, and best of luck with the series.
Thanks a million, Piers.
Much love to the homie. Much love to the homie. Good show. Good show. Good show. Shout out to Tucker Carlson. Vin, what do you think of the situation of the black dude that stabbed the Ukrainian woman? I thought it was horrible. Why this fucking guy was out with 14 counts on his jacket is crazy to me. I also think that it's very interesting that... So there was that lady, the baseball lady with the Philadelphia Phillies and that whole situation, and then there was this woman. And I was just watching... I mean, that's all you could see. And it was like flooding Twitter. It was so interesting to see. And the narrative is nobody's saying anything about this. It's like, do you honestly believe in a country of 340 million people that is flooded with all these guns and mental health issues, that this is not happening on a regular basis? Or is the idea that this is happening only to white people? The fact of the matter is that, and you know, they have to put the you know, her made up face on the thing, like, because it's interesting. It's like they have the picture of her on the train when she looks pretty much plain Jane, but then they put the other pictures where she's all made up and she looks like a beauty queen and things like that. And the contrast to the mind of certain Europeans is, look at this beautiful white blonde Aryan specimen being massacred by this person, and this is happening all over the place, and you can't trust them, and blah blah blah, and we need to get them out, and yada 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 yada. All of this is about stoking fear. I don't think that the people behind these kinds of campaigns are worried that their daughters are going to get stabbed and then go on the bus. I think these people on these campaigns have a giant block of white people that they're having a very hard time convincing to go to their side, because those people are not racist. And I think they understand that fear is something that can get people to override their morality. Scripture says there is no fear in love, but perfect love casts out fear, because fear has to do with torment. The one who loves, the one who fears, has not been perfected in love. So the opposite, these people have figured out the opposite of love is not hate, it's fear. And so they're trying to appeal to the principle of self-preservation to recruit other white people into this project, because they know in about 5 to 10 years, demographically speaking, they're not going to be at the top of the pile unless something significant happens. And they don't have enough numbers to do that. So that's what I think of what's going on there. But for decades, my white friends were telling me they don't see race. But now it seems pretty clear to me that they did see race the whole time. Look, if your ultimate identity is in your race, I completely and totally understand why you would be in complete and total fear on every side. If you're brown, I could see why you'd be in fear. If you're white, I could see how you'd be in fear. If you're Muslim, I could see how you'd be in fear. If you're a Jew, I could see how you'd be in fear. XYZ, how you'd be in fear. The fact of the matter is, your race and your nationality is not what ultimates you. What ultimates you is that you're in the image and likeness of God. And that's true of me. That's true of my wife. That's true of my brown kids. That's true of the daughter of a white supremacist. It's true of a settler in Gaza. It's true of Amr, Abu Bakr, Yahya, etc. All of us are image bearers of God. Life on earth is very short. As for me, God has told me I have 3 principles to master in this life before I'm allowed to go. The first one is how to truly and honestly love unconditionally at least one person. Then there's another one, and there's another one. So those are my 3. Whatever yours are, you get with Jesus and figure it out. That's the only way out of this loop of fear and terror and tribalism, etc. I'll leave you with that. Much love to all you beautiful people. Love your neighbor. Take care of each other. Middle America, we are the media. Till next time, guys. And do not